Chapter 38, Epilogue. Hakan kept his oath to his new masters. He assembles and trains a new secret order of Nethergate assassins loyal to the Queen. They would become the feared private weapon of the royal family for the next 100 years. Emirate Seth Elbald. Following the war, he was released from prison after new evidence was revealed that proved it had been the fallen priest, Razi, who had framed him. Under his leadership, the Ethelbald family fell into relative obscurity as the Godwin family becomes the new powerhouse in Stormfist and the Quendom. Amot Sparrows, having paid for the lighthouse at Nerva, his family was given exclusive trade rights and authority in Istrise. As the decades progressed, his family made millions more poch from all the wealth that came pouring in from the trade with the island nations. Millis Rovery, keeping her promise she made to her uncle on his deathbed, she finally agreed to marry. She now considers her life full of joy because of her 3 children. However, she still visits Gress's grave often. Commander Summer served faithfully as first officer aboard the INS Karzelik until Jacobs was given a new post and she became captain of her own ship. Captain Jacobs, following the construction of the newest fleet flagship, the INS Lino and Kuldis, named after the first island nation's chairman, Jacobs becomes the first captain of the elite vessel protecting the islands from both pirates and enemy navies alike. Captain Diego becomes very rich in the early days of transporting cargo between Nerva and the Quendom. He retires early and spends the rest of his days living comfortably in Istrise. Mr. Oakes, having also become rich from the trading, retires early. The old first mate bought the Dawning from his former captain, and spent the rest of his days fishing on the high seas. Aeolus heard about the other elvish settlements north of Folena from Laszlo. The teleporting elf decided to go on an adventure to see his kin. Fintis helps his father when he can, but mostly serves as Chief Wren's personal bodyguard. His life is never boring. Wren succeeds his father as the chief of Alcid. While humans are still forbidden from entering his domain, he does let some elves leave the village and interact more with the humans and holy lunas. Cathanel says her days are filled with cheer and gladness as her family is all still alive. Though some days, she does want to strangle Oro's little neck for all the mischief he gets into. Oro, the future chief, is still as rambunctious as ever. He loves getting his best friend into trouble whenever he can. Terra, despite her constant reminders and pleading, Oro still finds all kinds of new ways to keep their lives exciting and free from boredom. Duncan Egan returns to the Knights of Resrel and receives another promotion and commendation. Later, he is personally selected by Kenneth to serve aboard the new flagship the Lino and Kuldis under Captain Jacobs. He and his family continue to serve in the Federation's navy for generations to come, earning the respect of many. Clark returns to the Knights of Resrel and receives another promotion and commendation, but declines Kenneth's offer for a transfer to the flagship as well, saying he had seen enough of the high seas and foreign lands. He takes over as the main swordsman instructor for the new trainees at the academy upon Gretchen's retirement. Daniel, despite his aversions to ships and sailing, he stays on as Tanya's personal assistant for several more years. He elects to stay in Nerva and help oversee the day-to-day construction of the lighthouse. While Lady Tanya's work often has her traveling back and forth between Obel and Solfolena, his favorite part about living in Nerva is whenever the Karzelik comes into port. Flair Kuldis, her last official act as chairwoman of the Federation, before retiring from the post, was the commissioning ceremony of the new flagship named after her father. Not one to sit around, Flair uses her influence, connections, and family's wealth to start a university in Obel, of which she became the first dean. She stays in contact with her brother and new sister-in-law and tries to visit with them whenever they are in town. Tanya continues in her role as the official ambassador to the Quendom. She helps to oversee the final construction details of the lighthouse and port on Nerva Island. Upon her retirement, she writes an autobiography about her life and experiences. It becomes a huge bestseller, as it dealt so much with battle strategies, politics, and life. The book is now required reading at both the military academy and the University of Obel. Desmond retires from political office and spends the rest of his days quietly in Obel. And upon Flair's request, he teaches part-time at the university as well. Jean, having completed her work, bid farewell to her friends, saying she was heading north. However, she would return should Ursh and Simeon ever need her help again. Simeon returned to his quiet life of practicing medicine in Harina until one day another old friend arrived at his doorstep in need of help. Ursh, upon her brother's defeat, returns to Nagara. She resumes her role as a high cleric in the new government. After realizing the war was not going to stop for anyone, calling upon her magical comrades, they closed the mountainous border forever. Now, she waits patiently for the arrival of the other chosen prince to help her with one last shadow of her past. Gress is awarded the highest medal of honor in the Quendom posthumously after the war for his heroic sacrifice. His brother still visits his grave once a month. Rose, following Alinda's exile, she retired from the Queen's Knight saying her duty was done. Secretly, she couldn't stomach the idea of serving Godwin as the new commander. She and Robert grew closer and finally got married. They ended up having 7 children, 1 boy and 6 red-headed fiery-tempered daughters. Robert continues serving faithfully as a Queen's Knight for 20 more years before he retires. He and Rose name their firstborn son after his fallen brother. The happiest day of his life was watching his son become a Queen's Knight. Ishan Phalanus continued to serve as the Oracle of Lunas until his final days. He tried to make peaceful contact with the elves of Alcid, but he never could find the entrance to their homeland. Elimark Phalanus enjoyed watching her family grow. She never stopped loving or thinking about Alinda. She ruled another 12 years before an illness took her life suddenly. She would be remembered as a great queen in the annals of history for her guidance during the wars and the trade treaty she signed with the islands, which brought great prosperity back to the Quendom. In the decades that followed, several ships would bear her name. Aelaneth Elbald, despite his family name losing much political influence. His remaining days were filled with joy alongside his wife and at seeing Syra and Marcus give them several more grandchildren. He never stopped thinking about his younger daughter until his final day. Her happiness was his greatest wish. Syra Phalanus spent many years supporting her husband as he built up his power base as well as raising her own family. When she finally became queen, her cunning and wisdom proved useful in her nation's many battles with Nagara. It was under her orders that Sauronix Castle was built as the first line of defense in this war until the Great Earthquake ended the conflict entirely. Following that, she ushered Falena into a time of even greater prosperity and peace. From that time on she made sure that her own family never knew the horrors of war that she had known. Marcus Godwin becomes Master of Stormfist in addition to being commander of the Queen's Knights. Already considered a hero by many, he leads Falena's army to several more victories. He also keeps his promise to the nobles by introducing gladiator games in Stormfist. Lastly, he works to find the best warriors in the Quendom to replenish the ranks of the Queen's Knights after only he and Robert were left. He becomes one of the finest commanders in the history of the Quendom. No one ever learned of his true ambitions and secret foreign dealings. Alinda Phalanus often thinks back about the friends and home she had to leave behind. However, her days with Laszlo were the best days of her life, she would often tell him. Laszlo Enkuldis, the wish he had made upon that shooting star that night on the beach with his sister had come true at last. He has Alinda. He has peace in his heart. And he is very happy. Postscript. Thus, it was that peace again returned to the Quendom of Falena. It would grow and prosper greatly thanks in part to the trade with the island nations. Soon the Quendom started trading with other nations as well. As the decades went by, the details about the great battle against the undead army, their ancient leader who wanted to become a god and destroy Falena, and the great hero who appeared to defeat him were mostly forgotten. The truth became nothing more than embellished myth and exaggerated legend. It became the tale of bards. A story told by parents to their children at bedtime. Such was the case even for the royal family several generations later. "Thanks, Dad," a young boy yawned with excitement. "You always do the best bedtime stories. You add all the fun voices and sound effects. Mom is just boring. She just reads the plain words and sends me to bed." A strong adult voice replied, "Hey now, son. You need to be nice to your mother. She is pregnant right now and has a lot of responsibilities with her job and all." I know," the young boy replied rapidly, "but I am just saying, I like your storytelling the best." The father smiled, "Thanks. I am glad you like it. My father did the same thing for me when I was a little warrior boy like you. Hey now, it is getting late. It's time for bed, kiddo." A tired and pregnant woman with platinum hair entered the room. "Farid, are you two done yet? It's time Frey went to bed and we did too, dear." The brown-haired man replied, "I'll be right there, Ashtat. We were just finishing up Frey's favorite bedtime story. Isn't that right, son?" She rolled her eyes, smiled, and left for their bedroom. The large warrior blew out the candle and kissed his son on the forehead good night. Just as Farid was about to walk out of his son's room, the young boy asked with sincere childlike innocence, "Dad, do you think one day, I'll be able to grow up and be a brave and strong guy like that hero in the story and like you too?" The father smiled as he closed the door. "Frey, you're a prince and my son. Of course, you will be. Of course, you will be." The nearly asleep prince mumbled before he finally dozed off, "That's awesome. But don't tell Leone. I want to surprise her." Farid chuckled at his son's words as he closed the door and went to join his wife, the new queen of Fulena. Fin.